Hello, Balakrishna. How are you?
Hello, Shane. I'm good. How about you?
Very good. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Wish you the same.
So this meeting is in the time slot of our usual global biweekly meeting, but I decided not to advertise it and see what type of organic attendance we'd get. I'm making decisions about how we promote our calls and how we move our community this year. So part of it is seeing how many people turn up here organically, and if we need to reboot the way that the calls are communicated and maybe structured.
Yeah, I think that we should do that.
Yeah.
Because I think I joined this meeting 3 times in last week and this week. And
really? You
today I
had
got the
old
right call.
calendar invites?
Yes, I had old calendar invites in my personal computer.
Yeah.
So today I just opened the OpenChain groups calendar and then joined.
So at the very end of last year, the recommendation was delete all the invites from the calendars to make sure that you would have no overlaps. A lot of people had orphans, it seems.
Yeah, even I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it happens. It happens.
We have more.
Sorry?
We have more participants now.
Excellent. Mark, hey, welcome, and Yoshida-san. So basically, this is a reboot call for our global work team. As I was saying to Balakrishna, I decided with this particular call to see how many people organically turned up and to build a strategy for future calls from there. I also wanted to run by something to the people who turned up. You are very much our regulars. I wanted to run an idea by you. Normally in OpenChain, we have one mini summit every quarter. I wanted to suggest that maybe this year we can change that and have 3 full summits, each summit covering one topic. I was thinking, how about we had an intellectual property hosted by our communities in the Far East, so China, Japan, and Korea, a virtual event, but hosted by those communities, and therefore having a flavor of their view of intellectual property. Having a security summit in the US, of course, collaborating closely with the OpenSSF project at Linux Foundation, basically getting our US company members to talk about compliance and security, and of course, our security reference guide. And then the third summit, to have an automation summit, basically hosted by our German contingent. So we have our board members from companies like Siemens and Bosch, and to have that community host an automation summit talking about the world, of course, but also especially what has happened in Europe. What do you think of that idea of moving from 4 mini summits to 3 topic summits in the year?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that would bring more of the global community together. I know there's a lot of work that goes on in Asia. I kind of follow the emails, but it's never the same, right?
Right.
So I think it's a really good idea. Simply for that, for us to connect more as a global community.
Yes, same here.
Great. Basically, I'll take that to the world community. A second thing I wanted to touch on was that in the US, with the meeting in the White House last week and so on, security is more important than ever. Now, I've been telling people about our security assurance reference guide, and not enough people know about it. So I'm thinking to do really, really heavy advertising and translations around that in this quarter. What do you think about that idea?
Well, more attention is always a good thing. I think the one thing I want to ask is, do we want to evolve it from a guide to a more of a standard stock? Even though it might not, I don't know how that would fit into the ISO world. But right,
Yes,
there's some confusion there about what guide versus. I mean, was the goal, right? Was to put something out there, put it as a guide, and just see how it would be received.
right. No, I agree, Mark. I see tremendous energy in security. I see people investing tons of money into places like OpenSSF. I think no one is as close as we are to an open source security standard. And if we made a new iteration and maybe tweak the terminology, call it a reference specification, get it out there as a draft, and see what happened. I think it might pay to be aggressive on that.
Yeah. So I think there's two stages to that. I think we need to get that story together before the publicity starts. We don't want to spend too much time on doing that, right? Because it sounds like you want to go now. But I do think we need to probably spend a little more time getting our roadmap, so to speak, in order, and we can start that process of discussion tonight. But I think let's say by the by next month we're done with kind of what we expect that thing to be. And yeah, I think the sooner we can get it out there, obviously the better. I mean, the reality is security is just going to continuously grow. It's in we're on the upward bound part of the steep curve of the S curve of this initiative. So I guess, yeah, I have one question that, what's the relationship with OpenSSF?
So the relationship is neither special nor problematic. They're a project which recently started. I mean, I think it was only October that they started. They're very well funded. They got around $11 million in funding. So they're working hard now on setting up these working groups to talk about best practices, training, and so on. Over last year, I was in contact with David Wheeler in general, and I helped him with presentations. Now he and Brian Belladorf are running OpenSSF. I haven't had a chance to sit down with Brian. I'm trying to talk with them sometime in the next week or two. But yeah, in short, they've captured the security domain mostly for open source. They don't have anything like a specification. And I'd like to work with them, but I'd also like to make sure that we push ahead with what we've got. Now there's
right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, like, I'm not going to wait, but it would be really helpful, I think, and I think you're touching on this, to reach out to them as like, what are their possible requirements for us?
right.
I assume they kind of understand what we've done and where they think it maybe even is on coming up short a little bit. Like, where is it, where can it be improved, right?
Absolutely.
And put that into the roadmap as we get that feedback from them, because clearly they're on that strong mission. I guess can you explain it a little bit more? They seem to, what I understand is they raise money, right? And then they go around and they help open source projects with giving them money resources to make sure that they're doing security. Is that
what's going on? Yeah. No, here's where it's a little bit nebulous. They're coming at everything at once. So they're looking at providing best practices to developers, which is an educational role. They're looking at a technical initiative to secure critical projects, which basically is what you're talking about, going and fixing the projects with resources. They've got a security tooling work group, which obviously is tooling. And I'm not sure if they've even looked at our tooling yet, but there's probably massive overlap. I mean, they're talking about CVE benchmarking, OSS fuzzing, and stuff on their tooling. They don't seem to have general inbound, outbound scanning, which we've got for compliance. They've got a work group on supply chain integrity. And it's not quite clear what they're planning to do there, but enable open source maintainers, contributors, and end users to make decisions on the provenance of code is what they're saying. Vulnerability disclosures and identification of security threats. So basically they've got 6 different zones they're moving at. And I'll be totally blunt. I don't want us to be shoehorned into, oh, join the working group of supply chain integrity. You know, I think we're already a lot further down the path than them on these topics. So I'd like to make sure that we maintain leadership where we're at and we don't get shoved into a corner on a working group, which will end up, you know, covering part of the domain.
Right.
So,
We'll hand it over as more of a ready to go tool. I don't want to use, well, tool is used in a very loose sense, right?
solution.
It's an instrument that they have available to them.
Right.
Of course, we're open to feedback on where they think it's coming up short. And in fact, I think it could be, the question to them could be, oh, we believe every open source project could potentially comply with the guide or spec, whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? And let them come back and say, well, maybe, but we are concerned about X, Y, and Z. And then we can, you know, evolve that a little more. But I think in the end, I think this is something they can pick up right now, right? To your point, and give it out.
And I mean, I think one of the largest barriers we'll bump into is the not invented here syndrome, right?
Right.
And to a large extent, what I'd like to do is not waste your time or my time on that. So I suggest we complete our tasks, we loop them in, but we don't get.
Yeah. We keep on track of where we want to go.
Exactly.
Listen, I think getting feedback when we can. But I think at the end of the day, one thing we always can emphasize is that we're about someone's program or process.
Yep.
And a lot of times these other working groups, the way you described it, I don't see them tackling process, right? We're about, you have a program or a process, and this is a way of validating your program or process. So that's where I guess we add value.
Yeah, absolutely. And this dovetails into something which I will stress has not been approved by Linux Foundation, but you know, I was chatting with my board, and basically we were talking through, in the compliance sphere, we've got a whole bunch of these projects, OpenChain, SPDX, we've got ACT for tooling, but we're lacking a coherent messaging. What if there was a sort of umbrella for all of it, like LF networking is the umbrella for networking? What if there was something like LF process management? And you know, OpenChain already has a massive global community that goes way beyond our spec. What if that chunk graduated into the umbrella? The OpenChain part focused on the spec. The umbrella included the OpenChain spec, SPDX spec, those projects still continuing, but to have a single landing point for companies to go and get their compliance process management or their open source process management started. And that's just noodling. And the reason that was noodled is because our community is covering so much automation, reference material, even building completely new process workflows outside of the spec itself. And you know, the idea was, could that mean that OpenChain as it is today gets a much wider mission and you know, turns into an umbrella that supports the whole global effort, and then would, like the Open Source Security Foundation, would have a broad remit to look after the projects in its domain. Now that just came up as a chat, and I wanted to let you know and get your thoughts on that.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, there are a lot of these different pieces of the puzzle, the compliance puzzle, right?
Right.
And you're concerned for the lack of cohesiveness between all these pieces, and there needs to be this place where you can learn about the cohesion with a holistic understanding of how they all work or fit in the world together, or relate to each other. And you see, are you suggesting possibly that the OpenChain project might take on that mission, or it may contribute to that mission, and this is a bigger mission?
I think conceptually in my head today, the thought would be that what we call the OpenChain project today basically is the massive amount of global and local work groups and all the activity and so on. And that could graduate upwards, this hypothetical LF process management foundation.
So
under
I
the
guess
foundation, then OpenChain pared down to the spec itself, SPDX spec, ACT tooling. those projects would all continue as projects with their own boards and budgets under the broader global infrastructure and under that community. So it'd really be about graduating our community's mental model of itself up and saying, you know what, we're already covering the entire domain. So now we're, that's what we are. And the OpenChain specific part, goes back to focusing on spec. So that's how I'd see it. Taking the stuff we've already got, rebranding it, and then placing all the other projects under the umbrella. So it's very clear from a communication perspective. What's what.
Sure. Yeah, I think, yes, it makes sense to explore that for sure.
Yeah. It's one of those things I'm sure some people will be for and some against. And I think it'd be very important that the projects never lose their autonomy, right? So their own.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that is that's got to be a concern for someone who comes to the LF. Say they've been in, they're new to the LF, and they come in and they want to, and they have this whole compliance problem. It's really important to have a cohesion or a cohesive story for everything so that they can build their mental model. Yeah, the thought I had was, I lost it for a second. One of the most important things I always think about, we should continue to talk about this as our project, right, mission, is ultimately, I always think of when I set off to work on something for OpenChain, we're about building trust in the open source that you get and use, right? We help build trust. Obviously, license compliance trust, security trust is a trust factor, and there's other pillars we can also talk about expanding on this year. So I just want to make sure that, that's consistent with what you're saying, that we still, that we're ultimately here to build that trust. And by the way, the other pieces do too.
Exactly. No, I'm totally with you on that. And this might sound strange, but when I see where things are going, like the Open Source Security Foundation, it's great they're doing what they're doing, but again, they're locked on a single domain issue, right? And we've already found that our domain issue compliance is now merger and acquisitions, export controls, security, because we're solving for the process. We're, as you said, ultimately, like a car company is a mobility company, we're a trust company.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our mission is to build trust. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit at some point, maybe in this meeting, about how we might continue on with growing out the spec. We have a license piece. I know there's a bunch of other working groups. I wanted to understand, we talked about having these add-ons because the spec is kind of like the core, flagship thing. And then we have this new add-on, the security. We have to talk about how that fits in, and how we can have possible other add-ons.
Yeah. And I suppose the question there is two things. One, do we alter our current spec, or do we simply spin out a new spec, which is virtually identical, but with that domain optic? So hypothetically, would we take the security guide and build that?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more in the camp of keep them separate modules.
Yeah.
The one thing we all know that in order to use open source, you got to comply with the license. Otherwise, you can't use it. Right? No license, no use. So that's like almost like germane in anything. So that's why it serves as a great flagship core piece that we assume everybody must achieve. They always can, and then as we discussed, some are going to be interested in security, but others are not. And we want to be, that's the key, not to have it too merged into the spec. Give people that sense of, I'm not obligated to do the security piece if I'm not ready for that.
Right. And, if I suppose hypothetically speaking, if we had things very separate, we'd have the issue of the pause, time for it to become an industry standard before it could become an ISO standard. If we have them as all part of the same spec, but modules, we could in theory update our spec and add the modules.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I mean, I think that's consistent with, how can I say it? I was hoping that it would be like that. Like the spec is the core foundation. Like you have to install like it's a prerequisite. You install the spec, and then you can install these other add-ons. And yes, they're part of the ISO. Yeah, I understand what you mean about they get a more smoother path to ISO-ness.
Yeah, we can do that for sure. And you know what? Why don't we get that conversation underway right away?
Mhm.
At the same time as we remix the security assurance guide as basically a spec. And then ultimately we'll get feedback from places like the Security Foundation about whether they want the remix to go solo or be part of an expanded module. And I guess for us, if our community doesn't disagree, the expanded module thing might be the easiest win.
Yeah. So, okay. I think the next step then would be to take this guide and let's talk about making it, I don't want to use the word appendix, but an add-on module and put it inside the main spec doc, right? So we can talk about that. And those are things you can elect to conform with. And this is like a kind of a logistical thing. We talked about possibly getting either additional logos, or you can get the core logo and put little extra sub logos around it. Right. That's something we should talk about, because that helps people understand it a little better, right?
Right. Yeah. And at the same time, I got the feeling, I don't think this is absolute, but I got the feeling that, for instance, Mike Dolan's easiest mental model was to see them as separate, like we'd have another security spec. So we probably need to keep that on the table as we edit and try to work out a way that the specification for security could operate on its own, but it also organically fits into the existing spec. And then our simple argument would be, look, we have an ISO standard that we can update, or we can try to get a new ISO standard. The obvious win is update this.
Yeah. So you're thinking therefore separate logos. The reason why I'm thinking about the logo is because that's the ultimate kind of thing you get to hang on your website, or that's
right.
It's the output that you strive for. You achieve the level of conformance, whether it's security and then you get to use that logo represents your achievement. So I guess, yeah.
I think we should ask the certifiers. So I think we should ask TÜV and others to maybe help us with that logo process. I've noticed that some of them stack like the logos together, right? Inside, I think TÜV they had one where inside it said it was a certain type of thing, and then outside section also had another number to indicate how it fit into a different portfolio. Maybe they can give us a...
Sure. I think we can look at several proposals there. So this is all together, right? So, I mean, clearly we can talk about how it's independent. It's a self-contained separate spec, but yet it's an optional piece you can choose. So right. That's one thing we're going to work towards. I get what you're saying. People want to see it as independent, but yet we're looking at giving that loose connection to our spec, right? Right. Okay.
And we're gonna face pull and push, right? I mean, it's possible that one of the other organizations will be like, "Give it to us! It's ours now," and run off with it.
Okay.
And it's also possible that we'll get the exact opposite, and people will be like, "We don't want to touch that. We didn't make it."
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure where our main trouble will be. We just
I agree with you, but I think let's go this route, and you never know until you do it how people will react. But I think we just continue on with we're here to offer up ways of people to certify their programs, their processes, their programs. It's a program certification, and this is what we do, and then they can decide how that fits within their world. I understand what you mean, that some not invented here versus, oh, we want to take total control. But I think we can try to navigate that by sticking with our continuous, consistent model of building trust in all your processes around the use and handling of open source.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And, I think one of my main concerns will be just to make sure that we get this all done so smoothly. No, we don't step on toes. We don't have any confusion across the place, but we definitely get to create these solutions as soon as possible.
Yeah, yes, I agree. We got to be careful too, because the one thing about the security one is I still haven't heard a lot of input from them, and I want to make sure. I think it's the right beginnings.
Yeah,
I just think we really need to prod a little, get people to challenge it so that we hear as soon as possible where they might have reservations, why this might not work.
absolutely. I think that maybe our savior will be the Open Source Security Foundation. Maybe they will be able to bring the people to the table and the focus to give us that, which would be great.
Yeah, maybe somehow you can also participate in one of their events, their conferences where you present this and then, see what they say. I don't know. However you can get that kind of feedback.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it would be really important to hear it as soon as possible. Okay, so as far as the SPAC and, how I can participate here, I'll start to merge the two into a single kind of draft doc.
Okay.
And make it a very distinct optional section and make a little paragraph to that effect.
That sounds good. How about yeah, I mean,
Or that's just a proposal. What do you think our next steps should be? Because there's a number of things going on. You want to get to that place where you can start really, talking about it, right? I think we need to get closure on that, a clear story about this is a optional, this is an independent but optional thing that relates to the spec. That it's an
Right.
extension of the spec, and have it look like that. And secondly, I think we have to have the logos in place. That's just to me a packaging thing where when people want to say I'm conforming, what do I get to do? I get to hang out this logo, and those are the two things I see that strike me as
must do.
well,
Okay.
putting the story together. Yeah, the minimum. I'm thinking, what's the MVP here? What do you think? What do you think is missing from the MVP, or are we overcommitting to the MVP here?
No, I think this is good. All right. So yeah, here's my suggestion. Is it possible that you and I could have a version of the security guide to noodle on out of the main domain so we can mess around with it for a week or so?
Yeah.
And I'll contact a graphic designer about the logo problem at the same time as contacting, a couple of certifiers to maybe give us a hint. And then if we swing back next week or so, we should have the idea of where we can go and take it to the community.
Okay. All right. Sounds like a good next steps.
We have a plan. This is exciting.
As always.
Yeah, I love
less.
the idea that we might be able to make a big impact here on this stuff.
Sure.
Okay, we have a plan. I guess we're on to the any other business. Is there any other business today? No? Okay, if there's no other business, then I guess we're done. We've got a great plan. We've got, if you can share it with me, Mark, we can hack at that document. I'll go find a designer today and get that underway as well.
Yeah, right after we hang up here, I'll send you the latest Word doc, and we'll. I don't know if you want me just to stick it into the core spec and give it to you, or just give you the two pieces independent.
Just as is, as two pieces right now.
I'll give you two pieces. Okay,
Yeah.
We'll both take a stab at it and see what we both come up with. Okay.
That would be fantastic. Mark, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay.
Krishna as well, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you both. Have a nice day.
You
Be
too.
well.
Bye.
Bye.